Council, call the meeting to order. For the record, it is October 26, 2021 at 4:30 p.m. We'll begin this afternoon city council work session with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Borton.
Here.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilwoman Perot. Here. Councilwoman Strader.
Here.
Councilman Hoagland.
Here.
Councilman Burnt.
Here.
Mayor Simison.
Here. Next item is the adoption of the agenda. Councilman Burnt.
There is a, sorry, Dean, I knew you were looking at me funny. I got stink. I saw it. I got it though before you yelled at me. There is a change to the adoption or to the agenda this evening. We're going to add, item 12 was added due to a pending 11/3 meeting cancellation. So with that, I make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as amended. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Next item is the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
I move that we approve the consent agenda for the mayor to sign and for the clerk to attest.
Can you pull 12 to discussion item?
Want to pull 12? I thought, okay, I was just going to have that done during the discussion. You wanted-
Oh, okay.
So, looks like,
I don't have a second, so motion.
Second the motion.
Okay, I have a motion second. Is there a discussion on the motion?
Motion maker would be willing to pull item 12 for a brief comment from Keith Watts.
Mr. Mayor, and this is in relation to item 12.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Does the motion maker amend their motion to approve the consent agenda, but remove item 12?
yes,
Does the second agree?
No.
Second,
that was a long process to get
yes,
that done.
exactly. So I have a motion second to approve the consent agenda with the removal of item 12. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The consent agenda is agreed to. Item 12 was pulled from the consent agenda, so item 12 sits before you. Council, do I have a motion or discussion on item 12?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
Keith Watts is here. I'd love to hear just a quick snapshot outlining what it is in light of discussions that have been going around. It couldn't hurt. You're here, you're the pro, and
Thank you, Councilman Borton, Mr. Mayor, council members. So the reason this was added, of course, was because next week's consent agenda is a possible cancellation. We have gone through the process for the last many years, I guess the last 3 or 4 fire engines that we purchased off of this HGAC cooperative contract that's been competitively bid. The fire truck quote was due to expire at the end of this month, and the process that we get is once the requester has me start the procurement process, then we actually get a quote from the manufacturer for the vehicles. We then send it into the governing body of the cooperative contract. They double check it against the contract to make sure that everything is correct and the pricing and the terms are per the agreement that was officially bid and awarded. That took a little longer than expected. Actually, the last 2 trucks that we've ordered have taken quite a while for them to get back to us because I assume they're busy as well. But they just got back to us a couple of days ago, confirming that everything was approved and per the contract. That's at the point when I actually print a PO and put it on the agenda. I tend not to do that until I've have confirmation of the correct pricing. That's the urgency of getting this. I actually got them to extend it 1 week through next week, but then when I heard the agenda was possibly canceled, I didn't want to risk the value of those trucks going up because like every manufacturer, every week they have increases and they could not hold their price past next week. And that's why, that's the urgency for coming to you today.
Council, further questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
mind from hearing from chief or someone in the department about these are replacements or I think they're for the new fire stations and
I can let you know, I know one of them is a replacement. There's one replacement and then one for Station 7 and one for Station 8, just for clarification. And the replacement was scheduled.
Mr. Mayor, follow up, Keith.
Councilman Hogan.
And the time frame to get these trucks is quite far out, correct?
Correct. It's 12 months to 18 months. We're hearing longer and longer lead times every week. As you can imagine, the pandemic has really put a bind on the supply chain. We have products that are just getting canceled with no delivery dates. That's pending. So getting on the schedule and getting them actually in the queue is critical.
Thank you.
Good question, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Borton.
Follow up to that, are the prices that were set with the POs, are they locked?
Correct, they are. So that's the reason for getting in is if it takes longer to deliver, that's on them. We're locked in at our price today.
Council, any further questions or comments? Or a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burr.
I move that we approve purchase order 22-0104 to Hughes Fire Equipment for 3 new fire engines for the not to exceed amount of $2,059,641.99.
Second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Is there a discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the item is agreed to. Thank you. Next up is item 15 under Department Commission Reports, which is Park and Recreation Department fiscal year 2022 net zero budget amendment in the amount of $9,500. Turn this over to Director Sidway.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. This is a net zero budget amendment to add a grant into our budget. Earlier this summer, we had the opportunity to apply for a grant from Together Treasure Valley. And 4 months went by. We thought they must have selected something else, but we were just recently notified that they liked the idea of adding cornhole boards into Settlers Park, which is what we had requested the grant for. They are heavy concrete, smooth concrete cornhole boards. We would like to add them into where we have our currently underutilized horseshoe courts. There are grass strips in between each of those, and we would simply add them to one of those pods. So they wanted to make an announcement of award recipients later this week, and I didn't want to attend that without coming to you first. So appreciate the quick reviews by legal, by Jessica, the mayor, finance, to get this on tonight. Lots more details were in the memo that I sent, so I think I'll just stand for any questions.
Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
when can we expect the first Meridian Cornhole tournament to take place?
Well, they're already happening. We started cornhole leagues during COVID last year. And we've got a tournament. I'll just put in a plug coming up at the home court using for cornhole. It's one that benefits the Christmas gifts that we buy for children in the community. And we actually have it's both volleyball and cornhole as 2 separate tournaments that benefit the same thing. Our list of cornhole, or sorry, the volleyball side's bigger than it has been in the past, and we're still looking for cornhole players. But out here, specifically in the park, we'll get these installed next spring and have them open next summer.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Pro.
First, I'd just like to say thank you to the Parks and Rec staff for just, researching the different opportunities, and to have a grant come to us is fantastic. I know you all keep your ear to the ground about different ways that we can make these small improvements, and they all add up over time. And so appreciate the staff's attentiveness to these kind of opportunities. And then, although Together Treasure Valley isn't here, we really appreciate that they approved the grant request from Meridian. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. And if I, assuming this is moving towards approval, when I see, I'm I'm planning to see them on Thursday. When I do, I will pass that on.
Thank you very much.
Council, any further questions or comments? Or a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Pro.
I move that we approve the fiscal year 2022 net zero budget amendment in the amount of $9,500 for Together Treasure Valley grant for cornhole boards at Settlers Park.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item 15. Is there any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Borton.
Aye.
Cavanagh. Perot.
Aye.
Strater.
Aye.
Hoagland.
Aye.
Burnt.
All ayes, motion carries, and the item is agreed to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Next item on the agenda is a Valley Regional Transit presentation on transit development plan and service update. I'll turn this over to Stephen.
Good evening, members of the council. Glad to be here. Stephen Hunt with Valley Regional Transit Development Director. So tonight's presentation is in follow-up to the 2022 budget development process and in an effort to be in front of the Meridian Council more often, keep you informed about plans for and the performance of transit services in Meridian. There'll be two things on the presentation tonight, just talking about the development timeline for the Transportation Development Plan and how that's integrated with the streamlined FY23 budget development process. And we'll also review the most recent service or performance for services and an update on the Route 30. So the Valley Regional Transit Board of Directors approved the FY23 to 27 Transportation Development Plan and FY23 Budget Development Calendar at their October meeting. And the slide here, as well as what was in your packet, includes a brief outline of what that development calendar looks like by quarter. The calendar directs the VRT staff to review the projects that are coming up in future years and facilitate a discussion about investment priorities with our stakeholders, with the regional transit team, the regional advisory council, and the VRT executive board. We'll be presenting what the current priorities are with the board next month in the November meeting. And we'll be preparing a recommendation for what the prioritization should be for their consideration in the January meeting. As part of that process, we'll be meeting with members of each of our different jurisdictions, their stakeholders, and getting input on both near-term and long-term investment priorities. And we'll consider how those will impact each of those different jurisdictions and service investments, capital investments, and investments in specialized services as well. So for Meridian, the TDP would address service and capital needs for both specialized services like Harvest Transit, the VA shuttle, and rides to wellness. It also would look at continuing and enhancing services such as the Route 40, the 42, and the 30. It would also look at potential connections to other communities. There's interest both to the north and to the south. CUNA is looking at connections as well as Eagle and Highway 44 communities about how they can have better connections into the employment and other opportunities here in Meridian. So the TDP would be looking at all those types of opportunities. Any questions about that so far? Because then I'm going to go on to just the performance review. Perfect. So as stated in the memo, if we look at September performance, September is up 14% over August, which is a positive trend. We see that kind of growth often as we go into the fall. It's good to see that ticking back up in light of the experience we've been having with COVID. 23% increase on routes 40 and 42. And so those are outpacing the overall growth. That's in part because they fell so far. So Route 40 is a commute express service into downtown Boise, serving Nampa, Caldwell, and Meridian. And that ridership fell off dramatically during COVID by as much as 75%. So we're starting to see that come back up. It's growing faster. It's recovering a little bit faster than the overall, but that's because it had farther to come back up. In September, we had 3,200 boardings on routes 40 and 42, with about 20% of those coming from the stops here in Meridian.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, Steve, what's route number 42?
Route 42, if we jump back to this map here, is a route that it also serves Nampa, Meridian, and Boise. It makes more local connections here in Meridian. It comes down Franklin to 10 Mile to Overland, and then Overland all the way down to Maple Grove to Town Square Mall. So it makes stops largely along Overland through Meridian. And that one actually has maintained its ridership better than the 40. It's a little bit more like the other services in the network, providing all-day connections. It dropped about 20 or 30%, whereas the Route 40 dropped as much as I said 75% initially with COVID. But it's good to start to see those things come back. Harvest Transit in the month of September had over 900 boardings, and the VA shuttle, which continues to, that was the service we started just this past year, and it's been slowly growing in terms of ridership. We pay only for the services that are provided, so that's an important note with that one, is that even though we only had 14 boardings in the month of September, each one of those were important trips, and those were the trips that we paid for. So the other takeaway that I wanted to bring out is when we talked about delaying the launch of the Route 30, it was in light of the Delta variant coming and the impacts that had on ridership. As you can see on the chart to the right here, we haven't seen a strong recovery in ridership as yet, but we're hopeful that this trend in September will continue to go up as we go into the fall, and that we should start to see us climb back out of the impacts of COVID. On the year, in terms of the routes 40 and 42 in Meridian, we're down about 40% compared to where we were in 2020. And that is my report, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you. Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
a couple comments and maybe a couple of questions. So first, Stephen, thanks for the memo. I think that helps, and I appreciate that you're going to be coming more frequently. And I think as you kind of refine the memo to start answering some of the bigger questions, I think will make this presentation conversation a little more efficient. I appreciate you being here today. So you touched on the 30 Pine. At this point, is it a case of that VRT is going to continue to evaluate and then say, okay, 90 days from now, we're going to start the route? I know that the target launch date has been naturally become a little bit of a moving target. Just help us understand what will be the decision point for when VRT will make the decision to launch 30 Pine, and how much notice will the council and the public be given before that route will begin?
Thank you, Councilman Cavanagh. Mr. Mayor, when we delayed that service, it was again in light of the unknowns of COVID, of the Delta variant of COVID, and not knowing where we were going to go into the fall. We talked about not wanting to start that service when ridership was continuing to decline. So what we're happy to see is if we think we're at the bottom now and starting to climb back out in terms of our ridership. We had discussed potentially getting to the target of 90% of pre-COVID ridership as a good marker for when we could restart the 30. Looking at the charts that were here on the screen, that might be a high target. If we see consistent ridership growth month over month, I think we'll revisit that assumption. But our goal was to make sure that we're launching the service at a time when we see ridership growth, and not launch it at the same time we're seeing ridership continue to decline, right? As far as the amount of time that we need to do that, 3 months is a good window between the time that we decide and when we launch, but we're trying to be as responsive as we can. And one of the reasons that we want to come back to the Meridian Council as frequently is just to make sure that you're all stay aware of where we are, and we'll be taking those conversations to the VRT Executive Board as well as to when we would relaunch that service. Last time we spoke, we didn't anticipate launching it before January. I don't see that changing.
Councilman Cower.
Stephen, and just maybe back to the conversation about the memo, maybe just a couple of requests as you kind of refine the process. I appreciate in your presentation, you showed, it looks like a monthly breakdown of harvest. I think your memo is a quarterly. It would be really great to know kind of this is where we are this quarter versus where we were last quarter versus where we were last year. So if that's not too much work, incorporating that in your memo before each time you come before us, it helps me kind of understand what programs are being successful, which ones we might want to take another look at. So as much information that you're comfortable throwing at us, I think it would be appreciated.
We can do that.
Thanks.
Council, any additional questions for Stephen?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
I've got one because you're here and maybe it's one to noodle on, but when we look at the metrics you're showing, is it important or valuable to us to see something like the ratio of revenue per rider in relation to the total cost of that route, or just the rider metric? Something that we could use to gauge that this route is successful, understanding it doesn't cover the cost. I get that, but if the sweet spot is 5% or 7% or whatever it is, that, or a certain ridership above which this is a successful route, below which at some point there's routes that should be canceled. Do we have that benchmark established for Meridian that you think would be valuable to us to know whether a route is successful or unsuccessful?
Remember, Councilmember Borton, Mr. Mayor, we typically try and set standards that are maybe the entire route. And we would talk about performance in boardings per hour is usually the metric that we're talking about. That has a component of input, right? So the amount that you're putting into the service is the hourly service, and then what you're getting out of it is the number of boardings. And one reason that we typically use that as opposed to a cost factor is because our costs, when we square up all the costs over the year, usually we get a good number essentially like once a year. So you can get that on a more infrequent basis in terms of a cost per rider. Usually what we use to track our performance is boardings per hour on the route level. So we can certainly come back and report on what the performance of the route 40 and 42 and 30 are on a boardings per hour ratio on a frequent basis, with some conversation about cost per boarding, I think is the metric that you were trying to get at earlier. What's the cost per boarding on an annual basis when we have all those financials complete?
Councilman Borton.
Continue. If you think that's not a valuable metric, I'd want you to say, no, you're looking at the wrong thing because that doesn't provide you valuable information. Here's why. But conversely, if you think that something like that is helpful to determine, I don't know when a route is no longer successful versus unsuccessful. If that's a type of kind of line in the sand, that would be helpful. Great. If you think it's not, then we can talk offline too, to help me understand, here's why that's not the metric you should be looking at, but you should be looking at something else. Money seems to need to tie into it somewhere. So I just don't know how to gauge that yet.
Yeah, Councilmember Borton, I would say it's perfectly appropriate to talk about cost per boarding. The frequency of that reporting might be less than being able to report on, say, cost per or boardings per hour. So used together, I think that would get you at and those are both, like I say, this is good metrics. The kind of industry standard would be boardings per hour. And then whenever your financials are complete, you could be able to report out on what the cost per boarding are. It's hard to dig super deep on that because your costs don't necessarily vary. Well, generally speaking, you could say, what's the cost per boarding over the system? It's harder to get at cost per boarding necessarily for individual routes. Sometimes the way to get at that is just relatively speaking, what's the cost or what's the boardings per hour of a route? What's the system cost per boarding, if that makes sense?
Yeah, you have that.
We can provide that.
And the last question on that point,
Councilman Borton.
are other cities that are utilizing these services asking a similar question, or if there's another city who utilizes some metric to determine successful, unsuccessful. We don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Councilmember Borton, yeah, our other jurisdictions are asking very similar questions, and our responses, I hope, tend to be consistently back to them, which is the challenge that VRT has is we connect communities. Jurisdictions tend to talk about resources within those communities. And a lot of the time, us trying to meet exactly the way a jurisdiction wants to see those costs broken out works at exactly the opposite purpose of what we're trying to do, which is connect them to other communities. So we try to show those costs in terms of like, what's the whole route cost? What's the system costs? And then we can talk about your share of it. It gets tricky when we drill down to say, what's Meridian's share of, like, if you were to say, what is Meridian paying per boarding on those routes in Meridian? That's where it gets a little bit more difficult to tease out.
Thank you.
Council, any additional questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council.
Council, we've reached the end of our work session agenda. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt,
I move that we adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn the meeting. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. We are adjourned. Council, call the meeting to order. For the record, it is October 26, 2021 at 6 PM. We'll begin tonight's regular city council meeting with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Borton? Councilman Cavanagh? Councilwoman Perot?
Here.
Councilwoman Strader?
Here.
Councilman Hoagland?
Here.
Councilman Burnt?
Here.
Mayor Simison?
Here. Next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd all please rise and join us in the pledge. Next item on the agenda is the community invocation, but we do not have the person who signed up, so we will go ahead and move on. Move on to the next item on the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burn,
move that we adopt the agenda as published.
Second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as published. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is adopted. Mr. Clerk, do we have anyone signed up under public forum?
Mr. Mayor, nobody signed up.
Okay, then we'll move on to tonight's action items this evening. First item up is a public hearing continued from October 12th, 2021 for McFadden Property H 2021-0048. I'm going to turn this over to Alan or Bill, which one?
Greeting, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. If you remember at the previous council meeting, there was a long discussion regarding this annexation and zoning of about 17.5 acres. It is at the northwest corner of Cherry and North Meridian Drive. They are trying to annex this property in order to get it into a new North Gateway urban renewal plan. There's been a lot of discussion with the applicant about how we could actually do that. Originally, we had some pretty extensive conditions of approval about how to bring the development in and what could occur. The council, after a long discussion at the last meeting, gave the direction to the applicant to staff to prepare a development agreement that basically says that you're annexing it into the city with CC zoning, with the condition that basically nothing can happen on the property, no kind of development without a future development agreement modification. Based on that, and I would then defer to Mr. Neri, staff prepared a very simple condition of approval to basically to that nature. And I guess from that, I can pass it on to Bill if he wants to talk any more about that.
Sure. Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So that we worked in coordination with planning on the findings and as well as the development agreement. You look on the development agreement. So as you've seen on all of our development agreements, as we annex property, we are required to zone it. So the zoning is then outlined in the development agreement, what's zoned for that parcel. That parcel then has a designation of uses that are defined in the UDC. So you step that down, you get this zone, that zone allows these uses. And then the specific conditions, if you look at in this development agreement, it's 5.1. The specific conditions narrow any other things on top of what the code allows. So commonly you'll see that and it'll say no car washes, no 24-hour drive-throughs, no whatever. And that's usually been the conversation with the applicant. In this case, because of that lengthy discussion, as Alan stated, the council wants to see what development is going to occur. He gave us a very generalized sketch of what he thought could work based on staff's advice that the council generally likes to see some idea of what could be done there, even if that's not really ultimately where you land. You can come back. Council's direction, and Mr. Timor was in agreement, was that what it says now in 5.1 is, or excuse me, 5.1A. Prior to development or building permit, the applicant shall submit a development agreement modification that concludes a comprehensive concept plan that addresses all of the issues discussed, including land use, landscaping, motorized and non-motorized circulation, transit corridors, building size and placement, entry features, open space amenities, architecture, the recommendation of the MDC Corporation, the Development Corporation, other pertinent planning documents consistent with the principles of mixed use community as described in the comprehensive plan. So the idea was before any development, any building permit, anything be done in this, the next concept will have to come back. That was something Mr. Gilmore was in agreement with. He stated so on the record. I know he's out of town today. He has signed this agreement because, again, we need to get this moving forward now. And if the commission or the council's in agreement, we're ready to move forward. We put all of these documents on together, which normally you wouldn't see it that way. You normally see findings, and you would see the DA and put them all on today because of the timing that is really contingent on state code, the development of this new urban renewal district, MDC's timing, their public hearing that will then come back to the council. So it's critically important to make that decision tonight. And if you're in agreement, we can approve all of these.
Thank you, Mr. Neri. The public hearing is closed at this point in time from that standpoint, but we are welcome to maybe have that conversation. If you want to open it back up and have further dialogue, we're more than welcome to do that as well.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burr.
is there anyone from the public here at City Hall or anyone online that would like to comment on this application?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, only the applicant is online.
Mr. Mayor, I don't believe unless my fellow council members disagree. I don't think we need to open up public.
And maybe we could make a motion, have any discussion or that.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burr.
Mr. Neri, in the motion, do we have to include item 2 and 3 as well, or are they all separate?
You can, Mr. Members of Council, Councilman Burt, yeah, you can include all 3 as part of your motion. If the motion is to approve those, I would just identify the particular project number and the specific action, which is annexation, then the zoning.
All right. Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burr.
I move that we approve item number H-2021-00408, public hearing for McFadden property that was continued from October 12th. The annexation of zoning of 17.87 acres of land with the CC zoning district. Also would like to make a motion to approve item number 2, findings of fact, conclusion of law for McFadden property. That's item number H-2021-0048. And then also on top of that, item number 3, which is the development agreement between the City of Meridian and Kobe LLC for the McFadden property, which is item number H-2021-00448.
Have a motion
Second the motion.
and the second. Is there discussion on the motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Pro.
I don't have a question about the motion specifically, but I'd like to ask a question to Mr. Neri. So the concept plan that was presented originally, it's in the staff report. If a member of the public reads the development agreement as it currently is and isn't aware that a development agreement modification will have to come forward before any, before any structures are built, is that going to create some confusion for, we've had lots of conversations about individuals that own property in the area, individuals who, have questions about what's going to go on that property. Having that concept, is it necessary to have that drawing, to have that concept plan tied to the DA? Or can we leave it with no concept plan specifically associated?
Mr. Members of Council, I guess, it was part of the presentation. It was part of what he presented as a possible proposal of what could be. I don't think it would be confusing, but if it were confusing, most people call and ask. They ask, are you telling me they can build 3 buildings on Fairview, 2 buildings on Meridian Road, and answer the concept plan? Everything has to come back. Everything has to be done over. So it may be that it could be something. So I mean, normally that's how the dialogue happens. So I don't really see, like, from a court side of anybody going to court over that. What did you guys allow there? And the answer, well, that's it. That is a concept, not approved anything. There's no plat of that. There's no building plan.
And Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
a Question for Bill. I just wanted to make sure, because I think it's in there in the motion, but staff had, there are like 5, 6 different things about building orientation for a gateway sign, limiting the building height or footprint, circulation plan 25. That is in that number 3, I believe. We don't have to include that, or do we need to include by reference? The development agreement, or was it in the findings of fact?
Number 3 is just the definition section. So I think those are in the findings. So again, the findings are really just the roadmap of how we get there. So as you get to the end of those findings, defines what the final decision of the council is. All those things were part of what was discussed, part of the record, all those things. So I think those are fine, because again, no, there's nothing in this development agreement that allows anybody, if this were to go to a different person next year, they can't come and build anything there. There's no defined anything. So just because there's a concept plan, they could come in with an actual permitting to do a plat that looks like that concept plan, and the council could decide, no, we don't.
Okay, thank you.
Council, any further questions? All right, if not, clerk will call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Borton.
Aye.
Cavanagh.
Aye.
Perot.
Aye.
Strater.
Aye.
Hoagland.
Aye.
Burnett.
All ayes, motion carries, and the item is agreed to. Thank you, Alan. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing continued from October 12, 2021 for the Heron Village Apartments expansion, H 2021-0027. Alan, any comments you'd like to make?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Alan Tiefenbach, Associate Planner. There was quite a bit of discussion at the previous meeting, in particular about the issues regarding parking. The council directed the applicant to look at whether they can include more parking, do some different building orientation. They originally had continued it to this date. The applicant has not had those issues worked out. We went back and forth on some future hearing dates, and the only date that the applicant was able to be available to do this would be the first one in December. The staff's understanding is that the applicant will be providing us some kind of updated drawings addressing the council's concerns for that hearing. So at that point, they're asking to continue it until December 7th, I think was the date.
Thank you. Council, you've heard that request. Mr. Clerk, do we have anybody that signed up to provide testimony on this item?
Mr. Mayor, nobody signed up, but we do have ladies in the room.
Okay. If this is a time that you would like to provide testimony on this item, we could do that. Or as you heard, December 7th is when we will have a revised plan for further consideration. Don't know if that works for you all, but if not, if you'd like to come forward, be happy to take your testimony at this time on the project. Okay. Not seeing anybody at this time that would like to provide testimony. So council, what's your pleasure at this time? On continuing till December 7th or not? Okay. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
with that, Alan, can you ask the applicant to provide, and we could talk after this, but if there's a member of the folks that are here, so they can get provided a copy of what this new proposal might be or whatever the solutions are, maybe send it to you guys in advance as well. You came here tonight expecting a hearing, so at the very least, and the applicant's cooperative, I'm sure she'd be willing to do that.
I can do that if I know who exactly we would want them to send it to.
Well, we could talk after, and
Or certainly if they want to email me. Yeah, if city clerk will give you my card. If you want to send me your email, if and when I get an update, I'll just forward that on to you so that you'll be prepared when the hearing comes up.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Strater.
have we communicated with the applicant a deadline to receive the revised concept plan prior to December 7th then, so people would have adequate time to review the new concept plan?
I'm sorry, councilperson, Chris and I were discussing, would you please repeat?
Sure. No, I'm just wondering if we've communicated with the applicant a deadline for them to give us the revised concept plan so that your staff will have adequate time to review it and the whole public will have adequate time to review it and the council. I just don't know if it's realistic to extend it to December 7th if
Right.
I just want to make sure we're not getting it at 11 p.m. on December 6th or something.
Understood, Councilperson Schrader. First, to add on to what we just talked about with Chris, what's going to happen is when I get the revised updated drawings, I will forward them to the city clerk. So if you contact the city clerk, he will make sure that you get all the updated documents. So don't email me, email him. I'll make sure that they have his email. Councilperson Schrader, in regard to your questions, you recently approved some regulation which helps us a bit now. If you recall, what it said was that drawings need to be provided at least 15 days prior to the meetings now. So the applicant is well aware that they need to have me these drawings sometime ahead, not the day before. This is kind of what drove what's happening this time, is that last week there were some discussions with Adrian about whether or not they had updated drawings for this particular meeting tonight. Being 7 days ago, they didn't have it. So we told them they had to continue. So we'll make sure that there's plenty of time.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thank you. Council, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
I move that we continue item H 2021-0027 to December 7th, 2021.
Second.
I have a motion, a second, to continue the item until December 7th, 2021. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the item is continued. Next up on the agenda, item 5 is a public hearing for Trust Storage Subdivision Number 2, SHP 2021-0007. We'll open this public hearing with staff comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I think this is going to be relatively simple. This is a request for a short plat. Property is about 1 acre. It's zone CC. It's located at the southeast corner of the East Overland Road and South Locust Grove. Applicant proposes to subdivide the property into a new plat consisting of 2 lots. Just a quick background. 2016, or sorry, excuse me, in 2016 acres of land, including this property, received annexation and zoning approval, and there was a development agreement that was done. In 2010, that additional property of that was platted out into 15 lots, and that was called the Somerton subdivision. And what that did is that there was a conditional use that was approved to allow a car wash, which you can see today now, that was on the north. And so there was a car wash that was approved on the north here by conditional use. Then there was another conditional use that was approved to allow the self-storage that you also see now. And that's basically at the south here and at the east. This present proposal, then there's one more vacant piece of property that's sitting there right behind the car wash between the mini storage. That's what we're dealing with tonight. Again, about 1 acre. Applicant wants to subdivide this into 2 1/2 acre lots for development of 2 different commercial buildings. We requested the applicant provide us some kind of site plan to make sure that what they were doing would actually work. This is what the applicant provided to us. This shows that you could fit at least 2 3,000 square foot buildings on each lot, along with the setbacks, associated parking, and drive aisle. So the parking is based on the square footages. There is an existing cross-access easement now. That is what you see here, and that is what you see here. So there's already allowed an existing access to South Locust Grove, as well as up to the north. The applicant has also shown us that they can meet the landscape buffer requirements, which have already actually been approved by the larger landscape plan for the rest of the self-storage. With that, staff didn't have any issues and recommends approval. I'll be happy to entertain any questions or comments at this time.
Thank you, Alan. Council, any questions for staff at this time?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Perot.
Alan, 2 questions. First, are they accessing off of a side street that's coming off of Locust Grove? I couldn't tell from the drawings where the access comes in. I assume it's there on the south side. Second question is, the drawing is only showing a small amount of parking spaces. Could that potentially change depending on the use of the property?
Yes, first, the question, again, there's two accesses. There's a current access easement and there's already access occurring, and that's coming off of south, directly off of South Locust Grove. There's a little drive aisle here, is what you see down here. Yes, this could change. All we were really concerned about is we weren't trying to tie them down to this being the exact development. It's just it was somebody asking to subdivide into 2 half-acre lots. We wanted to make sure that they could reasonably fit something in here that worked. So based on that, they looked at like some typical dentist or doctor office types buildings, which would be 3,000 square foot each. And then based on the commercial regulations of 1 spot per 500, they were able to show that they could meet the parking here. That's really all it is. But yes, it could change. This isn't really a development agreement. It's just tying this down. This is just showing them, yes, we can actually make some kind of development work here. Did that answer your question?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Pro.
Yes, it did. You mentioned that you wanted this drawing to represent that it's possible to fit something there. And so I didn't know if there was a use that required a lot of parking. I assume that the structure would have to shrink to fit everything on the site. And so I just didn't know if this was an example or I knew it was an example. What I was saying is, depending on what they put there, do you think this drawing represents what actually will happen or could happen?
The applicant has told me that they were looking at doing office, like a dentist office or something like that. So based on office, professional office type uses, yes, that would work here. Probably wouldn't be able to fit a high traffic generation, a restaurant or something. A 6,000 square foot restaurant probably wouldn't work. But sure, their limiting factor here would be parking and setbacks.
Council, any further questions for staff? Okay, is the applicant here and like to come forward? You say your name and address for the record, be recognized for 15 minutes.
Joey McAllister, 2115. That better? Joey McAllister, 2115 East Bowstring Street, Meridian, Idaho. We concur with the staff's report. We are looking to probably put a dentist office in one of the sites. Be about 3,000 square feet. Stand for questions.
Thank you. Council, any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much. Spark, do we have one sign up to provide testimony?
Mr. Mayor, only the applicant.
Okay. And we have no one else we have one person in the room that says no, nobody online to provide testimony. So I assume the applicant waives their final comments on the project. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing or further questions for your staff?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I move that we close the public hearing for item number 5, SHP 2021-0007.
I have a motion, a second to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the hearing is closed.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
after considering all staff and applicant testimony, I move to approve file number SHP 2021-007 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of October 26, 2021.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the item before us. Is there any discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Borton, Cavanagh,
Aye.
Burrow,
Aye.
Strader,
Aye.
Hoagland.
Aye.
Burnt.
All ayes, motion carries, and the item is agreed to. Thank you very much. Okay, next items up is ordinance number 21-1951. Ask the clerk to read this ordinance by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's an ordinance related to H 2020-0124 Ambles Run subdivision for annexation of a parcel of land being a portion of lot 26 of block 1 of Dunwoody subdivision, as filed in record in the office of the Ada County Recorder, Boise, Idaho, and book 58 at page 5,482, as shown on record of survey number 7837, as filed for record in the office of Ada County Recorder, Boise, Idaho, under instrument number 107033607. Lying in the northwest 1/4 of section 29, township 4 north, range 1 east, Boise, Meridian, Ada County, Idaho, and being more particularly described in attachment A and annexing certain lands and territories situated in Ada County, Idaho, and adjacent contiguous to the corporate limits of the city of Meridian, as requested by the city of Meridian. Establishing, determining the land use zoning classification of 2.88 acres of land from RUT to R2 low density residential zoning district in the Meridian City Code. Providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Recorder, the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, and providing a summary of the ordinance and providing for a waiver of the reading rules and providing an effective date.
Thank you, Council. You've heard this ordinance read by title. Is there anybody that would like it read in its entirety? If not, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Pro,
I move that we approve ordinance number 21-1951 with the suspension of rules.
Second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 7 under suspension of the rules. Is there any discussion?
Item number 6.
Oh, item number 6, I apologize, yes. Is there discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the item is agreed to. Next item up is item 7, ordinance number 21-1952. Ask the clerk to read this ordinance by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's an ordinance related to H 2021-004A McFadden property for annexation of a portion of the east one half of the southeast one quarter of section 1, township 3 north, range 1 west, Ada County, Idaho, and be more particularly described in the attachment A, and annexing certain lands and territories situated in Ada County, Idaho, and adjacent contiguous to the corporate limits of the city of Meridian as requested by the city of Meridian, establishing and determining the land use zoning classification of 17.88 acres of land from RUT to CZ Community Business Zoning District in the Meridian City Code, providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, and providing for a summary of the ordinance and providing for a waiver of the reading rules and providing an effective date.
Thank you, council. You've heard this ordinance read by title. Is there anybody that would like it read in its entirety? If not, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Pro,
I move that we approve ordinance number 21-1952 with the suspension of rules.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item 7, ordinance number 21-1952 under suspension of the rules. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the ordinance is agreed to. Council, anything under future meeting topics? Okay, then do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burt.
I just wanted to east this evening for the tragic loss of life and yesterday was a sort of an ugly day in the Treasure Valley, but very grateful for those who prayed and who have supported our the community members and families and victims and those who were injured. Thankful for police officers and the first responders who were involved as well, along with our Meridian police officers who assisted the Boise Police Department. So just thoughts and prayers to our friends to the east this evening.
Thank you. Well said.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burt.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
I have a motion to adjourn the meeting. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.